All right, we are back, Sons of UCF. My name is Adam Eaton, and I am with my good friend and yours, Mr. Brian W. Peterson. Brian, I hope you and everybody else out there had a very happy, healthy, and fruitful Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah, we did. I meant to take a picture of my plate and post it on Twitter just to see what kind of reaction I would get from people. Forgot to do that. I was so enamored with eating my Thanksgiving dinner that I forgot to take the picture. It's probably for the best, though. But happy
Yeah,
Thanksgiving to you and all the listeners out there.
our loss. We didn't
Yep.
get the Brian W. Peterson dinner plate. Maybe next year, if we keep our fingers crossed, Brian will grace us with that.
Here's an inside track. Uh, I don't like my food touching. I'm sure that
Same,
that surprises absolutely nobody, but
same
I don't
boat,
like my
same
food
boat.
touching. So there has to be ample space between the potatoes, between the turkey,
Yeah.
between whatever the sides are, mac and cheese, all that fun stuff. No touching.
That's the right way to do it. Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
one of these that literally keeps everything together like a garbage pile. I do need some. I need some decorum in the Thanksgiving plate, Brian. And we're having a society here. Can we? Yeah, segregate our
Yeah.
meals the right way. Like let's get all the stuff figured out. But
If you're
hopefully
if you're
you.
if everything is touching, you've got too much on your plate, and it's time to go back first. It's like second plate.
Well, you ruin the flavor profile when you're mixing it all together. Then you
Yeah,
ruin the
I
flavor
agree.
profile of the
I
individual
agree.
dish. But that's a whole nother podcast episode that Brian and I might start in the off season,
Off-season
as
talk.
off season talk, Brian, because obviously this season has come to an end. The Knights go to Provo, and while early on you were kind of like, wait a minute, are we gonna? Is this? Could we? No, we couldn't. The way BYU comes out with a 41-21 win, Brian, obviously ends the night season. But let's start before we get into all that. We'll spend some time talking about what's next and where UCF maybe goes from here, Brian. But 41-21, again, Knights start off in a good note, and BYU ends up being what we thought the number 9 team in the nation might look like, and they steamrolled UCF later on. Your impressions, your thoughts from the game on Saturday.
Great first quarter from UCF. Terrible second, third, and fourth quarter from UCF. The offense, again, besides that first quarter where we scored our only 2 touchdowns. Well, yeah, it wasn't just the 2
We had we
touchdowns.
had a we had a third
We
quarter.
did have the third one, but it didn't count. It didn't really matter in the end. So I only counted the 2. The 2 first quarter touchdowns, which did put the Knights ahead 14-0, which I think surprised some people. Certainly surprised me. I did not expect us to come out on our first drive, go 70 plus yards, and end it with a touchdown. But I'll take it. And the defense was fired up. I think they came out and got a stop right away, gave us the ball back, and momentum was certainly on our side. But you're lying to yourself if you thought that there was any chance UCF was going to walk out of Provo, even up 2 scores. I checked the ESPN statistics. Still had us still had BYU as a 60% chance of winning, even when we were up 2 scores in the first quarter. So, not a whole lot of confidence that we were going to be able to hold on to that lead. And of course, BYU did come thundering back and put a whooping on us, beat us by 20 points in the end. But there were some flashes. There were some good things that we saw. It looks like the folks that traveled to Provo had a good time. Looked like the weather was pretty nice. It was sunny, I hear, and somewhere around 40 degrees, I think, was the reports I was getting. And that's one of the most scenic places to watch a college football game. It's definitely on my bucket list to get out to BYU at some point and watch a game there.
Yeah, this game felt like a microcosm for the season. There were some flashes of like, oh wow, look at that, that's great, or hey, look at this player, he's playing really well. Then there were some flashes of like false start everybody but the center, right? We got one of those, which is always awesome when you get one of those, right? The defense playing okay, but giving up a couple of chunk plays, missing a couple of tackles, a trick play that ends up being an interception thrown by Dwayne Thomas. Like it was just a microcosm of the season for the Knights. And you're right, when it was 14-0, I was kind of like, we're not gonna. There's no chance, right? Well, this isn't gonna.
Don't give me hope.
Yeah, this isn't really gonna happen, is it? And it's funny you look back on that now. Those first 2 drives, Taven Jackson probably played as well as we've seen him in stretches this season. And honestly, it's because the offense seemed to have broken down. These weren't scripted plays. It looked like things were kind of getting off script for him, and he was kind of making things happen on the fly and throwing some weird, check down routes and finding some guys open. And it's almost like he played better without the structure of maybe actually going through an offense, and just kind of looked more like just read and react kind of backyard football. And all of a sudden we're at 14-0. Defense came out pretty good. To be fair to BYU, it's an 11 a.m. kickoff time out for them. I think Frost's philosophy from what I can tell the entire season, is he wants to be in the opposing stadium, in the opposing city, as short amount of time as possible. So where previous coaches got there a lot earlier, I think Frost very much believes in get in, go to sleep, get up, go play the game. Don't let your body clocks get too, get too messed up with everything. So perhaps the early start, got BYU. They learned the night before they were in the championship game for the Big 12. Maybe that impacted them a little bit. I think Scott Frost even said in his post-game pressure, like he felt like maybe BYU wasn't maybe was looking past UCF a little bit, or maybe wasn't prepared for UCF to come out with that kind of energy. UCF got the ball first, which is not something we've done a lot. It seems like we defer a lot and we go on defense first. So a lot of things happened kind of early on that were sort of weird and unique, but you kind of knew it was going to be really tough to keep that up throughout the majority of the game. And obviously at that point, BYU proves to be the better team. And obviously they played well, and they pretty much run UCF over. LJ Martin runs everywhere, a punt return for a touchdown, which I don't think we've given up any special teams touchdowns. I think that's the first on the season for UCF, and a late valiant effort with some trick plays and whatnot. But it was a microcosm of 2025 in a 4-hour time block.
Yeah, some stats here for you. UCF only accumulated 296 yards of offense against BYU's 407. The glaring statistic that stood out to me was the rushing yards. BYU had over 100, they had 118, and UCF only managed 42 yards of rushing offense on the day. So, when you have an offense that's built to be complementary between the passing game and the running game, and the running game can't get going, we all know what kind of recipe you're talking about there. And obviously, the offensive line has had issues all season long. We've kind of beat that horse already. We know what to expect from an offensive line, and when the offensive line isn't working, the running game is not going to work either, right? Miles Montgomery and Jaden Nixon try to make some plays, but that defensive line for BYU is no joke. Those are some big boys on BYU, some bigger guys than we're probably used to playing, and they threw their weight around, and we felt it.
Yeah, I think if we've learned anything about Taven Jackson too, he also seems like a quarterback who really stares down the rush, right? And obviously BYU was blitzing a ton, and I think Taven starts to look at that pressure and move around, get off his keys, and obviously gets UCF off schedule at that point in time. And it's really anybody's game. We saw that a lot from BYU, a lot of defensive pressure. It was funny thing about you just mentioned rushing, Brian. Perhaps the star of the game for UCF was freshman running back AJ Adai. Fun stat. He didn't have a single rushing yard. He was the star of the game. The running back was the star of the game. Not a single rushing yard, though. He had 5 receptions, 62 yards, and a touchdown, and he threw a touchdown pass to Taven Jackson. So that just shows you where UCF's rushing attack is at this point. Is our breakout performance from a running back had nothing to do with him actually running the football, which is fantastic.
That's right. He got in the end zone. That's all that really mattered to me. But yeah, he's a player that I'm excited to see what he does in the offseason, see if maybe he's got some portal interest, if he's played up into that role, or if he comes back. And I'm sure we'll get into that later in the show. But yeah, he had a good day as far as the running backs go. And we've been seeing more and more of him as the season has progressed. And I don't know if that's because, Frost and Co. are just trying out new things, or if they're getting more confident in him, or if it's a depth issue and we're just trying to, keep Miles off the field and keep Jaden off the field. But yeah, he had a really good day. I was really impressed with him.
Well, Frost called this the kitchen sink game, right? Like, hold nothing back at this point. Shoot your shot was his mantra going into this game. And you saw a couple of unique play designs and play calls, and that may have been his way of just saying, like, I'm just going to leave it all out in the field here. I do think we'll learn after this season. I think Miles was certainly dinged up. I think that shoulder injury that we saw miss a game for, I do think that's probably been pretty painful that he's been playing with, right? That leaves you down to Jaden Nixon as your only running back because you don't have Swint or Gage right now. So one of those situations where we've seen this a lot in UCF, and really you see it all over sports, where injuries happen and some guy gets a chance to kind of step in and make a name for himself. And, hats off to AJ Adai for seizing that opportunity, playing well and making a name for himself. And now, as you talk, we think about, okay, what could he be in this system next year? And so he gives you now a name of somebody you're excited about. Defensively, Brian, the again, same story. Lewis Carter was a maniac, 12 tackles. Cole Kozlowski, a maniac, 10 tackles. You know, a couple of really early drives where BYU struggled a little bit. I think UCF defensively kept them in the game, but then that offense sort of just took over, and unfortunately, I think, you know, we were undermanned. I think a couple of missed tackles. Braden Marshall had a missed assignment that led to a touchdown by Parker Kingston. So I think, you know, Ben don't break defense. You saw some really good plays, and then a couple of plays kind of trip them up, and before you know it, all of a sudden, you know, BYU is up to 41. They held them a field goals a couple of times, a couple of field goal misses.
They did. Yep.
So defense, I think overall, again, while certainly wasn't, certainly didn't, you know, when 41 points are on the board on the other team's column, you can't say it was the best defensive performance ever. But again, I don't know if the defense was the issue for UCF on Saturday.
Yeah, Bear Bachmeier, their quarterback for BYU, pretty much had his way with us all day long. He was 21 for 25 attempts, 289 yards, and a touchdown. And the thing about him was he's a big guy. I think he's 6'2", and I mean he is built more like a tight end than a quarterback. He actually wears 47 on his jersey, not a traditional quarterback number. And he has a pair of legs on him. And when BYU needed him to, he was able to convert third downs with his legs, make some plays, keep some drives alive for BYU and the Cougars. And I think he was a big part. Now, if you were watching the announcers on the ESPN2 broadcast, I mean, that's all they talked about.
Oh my God, they love that guy.
He was the only guy they talked about. Oh my gosh, BYU and this quarterback, Bear Bachmeier, and his brother Tiger. What a Thanksgiving dinner that must be like.
I'm also
Bear and Tiger.
They have a third brother named Hank. So what happened to him? Did he Octopus wasn't available? Like what happened? How did Hank just get Hank? I don't know what happened there.
Better than squirrel, I suppose, right? You don't want to be the small animal. Bear, tiger, hedgehog.
The praise for Bear Bachmeier was Tebow-esque at times. He actually reminds me of Tim Tebow a little bit, and that I don't think he's got like this, you know, super great quarterback skill set. Like he's not going to slice defenses up like you see some great quarterbacks, but he's big, he's efficient, throws the ball where he needs to, picks the first down with his legs, makes defense kind of honor the run, and then he can throw over the top. So I'm not trying to call him Tim Tebow, but he had a very Tim Tebow-esque performance in my view, and the announcers certainly were all over him like he was the second coming of Tim Tebow. And look, I think I'm proud of the fight UCF put in this game. It certainly, you saw what happened at Texas Tech, and you know, you and I did the post game. We were like, what were we even doing on the field today? We didn't even look like we cared. And this one, you saw some fight. You saw some guys show up. You saw some guys make some plays. There were pockets of times where you thought, okay, maybe one break here. Look, I would have loved that fumble on the goal line. The forward progress thing was a debate all day long. Like
I'm not even going to get into the refs.
I would have loved that fumble on the goal line. That'd have been fantastic. That'd have been one of those things where if you were going to ever have a situation to upset a team like this, you need a bunch of weird things to happen. We saw some of that stuff early on offensively. Getting that fumble right there on the goal line would have been one of those weird things, but apparently that's not forward progress. But BYU pushes LJ Martin like 95 yards, with 7 linemen, and we're fine with that. Frost said post game he didn't want to talk about it either. I think we all saw on that one, but that would have been a great break for UCF to have gotten that fumble on the goal line.
The only thing I'll say about the refs is if you watch the game, you understand exactly what we're talking about, and it's probably distasteful for the losing team to talk about, oh, the refs got involved, or they caused things to change in the game. So I'm not going to say that, but I mean, even Scott Frost, who is usually not very animated on the sidelines, he several times during this game was in the refs' faces, yelling from the sideline. I mean, there were some questionable calls if you were a UCF fan, certainly wondering what the refs saw, because what we saw on TV on the broadcast certainly did not indicate that, the penalties or plays that should have been called or weren't called were taking place. And I think that Scott Frost showed that from the sideline. So it is what it is. The game is over. I mean, BYU is obviously the better team. They're trying to make a push for the playoff, obviously going into the Big 12 championship game. So they had a lot to play for too. But some questionable calls on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I guess I watch a lot of the games in the stadium, so maybe I don't see this, but Frost was pretty animated on TV, and they were not afraid to show what Frost was kind of talking about. I will say the last thing on the penalty thing, what he said post game Frost was they never blew a whistle to indicate forward progress had
Correct.
stopped. So they let it keep going, and then we strip a fumble, and then we get the fumble. Like, oh, no, it's forward progress. So there was no whistle. There was nothing to stop the play. And then after the fumble, they're like, oh, by the way, the play was stopped over there. I think that's what he was mad about.
I was watching the TV broadcast and listening to the Mark Daniels radio broadcast, and there was a couple times where even Mark Daniels, who's usually pretty reserved when it comes to bias for the UCF game, was like, "Whoa!" I mean, he made a comment at one point. BYU had held one of the UCF players at one point. I don't remember who it was, and Mark Daniels' comment was, he got held like you have, or we're holding like we haven't seen a relative in a really long time. Are we really allowing this from the refs? And that was one comment. And then the other comment he made was that play you were alluding to at the goal line when there was no blown whistle. And he's talking to Gary Paris, and he asked him on the radio broadcast, like, Gary, you're sitting right next to me here. Like, we can hear the quarterback clap from the field. Like, that's how quiet it is. We can hear the quarterback clap. Did you hear a whistle blow? Because I certainly didn't hear a whistle blow. And he also pointed out the referee threw a beanbag down, which usually indicates that there is perhaps a turnover, a possession turnover there. So the referee throws the beanbag, no whistle is blown, and then they decide, oh, just kidding, forward progress was stopped, and there is no fumble. So I don't know what they saw. Mark Daniels would tell you that we disagree. A lot of us saw what we saw on TV, and again, the game is over, so no lamenting on that. But the refs were not going to allow UCF, barring a major miracle, to walk away with a win. BYU needed that win.
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't have expected anything less than that,
Sure.
obviously. And you're right. It's a loser's lament every time to go, oh, the referee screwed us and we didn't get calls. But if you watch the game, you saw what we saw. And I'm sure there are certainly some things that are different. A lot of the conversation, though, obviously, UCF loses. It's great, right? Well, not great, but whatever. Frost goes to the post game, and that's where things get even a little bit more interesting, Brian. I want to read you this quote. Somebody essentially asked him about a 14-0 lead, right? That was the question. Like, hey, what do you think about their good start, and how'd you get the 14-0 lead? And his answer was, quote, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm honest, losing some guys. We had a smaller group here today, and a way higher percentage of guys that made this trip are here for the right reasons. We're battling for each other, and I think there are fewer distractions, and I think that played a part in it. So when asked, like, hey, you guys got off to a good start, like, what do you think? He offered, by the way, there are some guys we did not bring on this trip today because they're not here for the right reasons. Without those distractions, we played better. Now, he didn't name names, and that was kind of what I think people are looking for afterwards. I guess you can go through the depth chart and figure out, like, who did I not see play that maybe normally does. You can have that exercise. I don't know. I don't want to assume. For all I know, somebody was dinged up and didn't make the trip, and that's why they weren't there. So I don't want to call anybody out by name, but there are a couple of starters that if you look back on who you didn't hear name called and who never rotated in, maybe that's your answer. But Brian, what'd you make of his comments about, like, as we start game 12, there are some guys who are not all in essentially, and there were some distractions that we left those guys home and we played better without them.
Good. Leave him home. Frost, like you said, did not name any names, but if you wait here a couple of weeks, we're going to see when this portal window opens who enters the portal. That'll probably give you a pretty good idea as to who some of these guys are that perhaps he was alluding to without naming names, and that's fine. This season, in large part, has been about Frost coming in and rebuilding culture, right? That's what we want to see. We want to see fight from these guys. We want to see effort on the field. We want to see people playing as a team. And I think a lot of the guys this year have had that mantra. Now, that's obviously limited to not the entire team. Maybe there are some people that were upset about lack of playing time or the way things were done in the locker room. I don't know. I can't speak to that. But if that is the case, and there were people that were not making this trip, and the team felt better and the coaching staff felt better because perhaps where there were less distractions, it's for the best. I mean, if you don't want to be here, the transfer portal is there. It's a known fact that football teams that have drama in the locker room do not perform as well on the field often. So if there's drama in the locker room, guys that don't want to be here, let them get out. We're going to have this entire offseason to rebuild certain position groups. Obviously, there are guys that we want to see come back, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, too. But if you don't want to be here, you don't want to be here. You're not a right fit for this coaching staff, for this team. It's for the best.
It was interesting timing, though, right? Because all season long, Frost has talked about the culture, bringing the guys together. Guys haven't quit. Guys haven't given up. And he hasn't necessarily made any mention of something like this, and perhaps he shouldn't and wouldn't do that. So it's curious timing with one final game on the calendar that all of a sudden now we have some distractions in the locker room. Makes you wonder what was happening behind the scenes. Are there guys that were, that were causing issues? Are there other stuff? The other thing he said post game that got a lot of attention, he was asked kind of about college football in general, and he said, to be honest, the game's in a bad place. Agents have already been shopping kids playing for teams for the last 6 weeks. So hopefully we have a good enough environment here that kids want to be in our building. So maybe you put those two comments together, Brian, and there's some players who are saying, hey, I don't want to play this one because I don't want to get dinged up because I'm going to be in the portal because I got this offer. I want to get this off. Like, who knows? This is all speculative on my part. Obviously, no, I don't think we may ever know the answer here, but I wonder if you can put those two together, and that's his way of being frustrated at some of the stuff that's happening outside of football and agents and NIL and deals and dollars and everything else that comes with college football in 2025.
No doubt. I mean, we know that college football is a backdoor business in a lot of ways. People come and try and recruit players, especially with NIL and all this money flowing around these days. These kids have agents that are working for them. So we've seen it time and time again where perhaps a family member or an agent gets in a player's ear and is like, hey, if you should really consider entering the portal and coming over here. There's interest from this school and you can make this much money over here and these sorts of things. And that does cause drama in the locker room, and it distracts from the goal of winning the games that are ahead of you on the schedule. So not surprised to hear that. Scott Frost has been very honest, I think, about his opinion about the way this system has come together thus far. He's alluded to the fact that it's great that players are getting paid. That's not the problem. It's just the regulation and the rules around how that should be happening and what should and should not be allowed. Players getting, people in their ear and perhaps pulling them and doing things behind the scenes before they should have. So no surprise by that. And I mean, I don't think he's wrong either, right? If we're going to have this system in place, it needs to be fair and we need to follow the rules. So curious to see who enters the portal and where they wind up. But, that's for conversation on another day.
Yeah, look, I think, we may never really know the answers to these questions, Brian. I mean, we may never get this inside information. And certainly, I'm sure Frost feels right in his evaluation of what he thinks. I'm sure players and agents feel right about their position,
Sure.
right? This is just something that you're kind of dealing with. But the game puts a bookend on the season, Brian. 5-7 overall for the Knights. You and I were talking before the show. Really right about that mark. I think a lot of people thought UCF would be in, right, as that 5-6 win mark. Some of us who are drunken idiots like myself said maybe 7, right? But in that 5-6 win mark, Brian, you were dead on with a 5-7 prediction, and thought this is kind of where the Knights were. So as we kind of bookend this season, in a quick thought, what do you take away from 5-7 year one, Scott Frost?
I've never been so upset about being right in my whole life. I would much rather have been wrong and us be 7-5 or at least 6-6 and perhaps making a bowl game. Maybe I'm not so upset about missing a bowl game this season just because this offense has been not great. And I don't know if I want to sit through another one of those. But if I had to summarize my thoughts on this into a quick sentence, it's that we are exactly where or better than we thought we would have been coming into this season, I think. It's tough to see that now. There's been pressure on the UCF football program because we haven't made a bowl game in a couple of years now, back-to-back seasons. I think I saw somebody post that we haven't missed a bowl game in back-to-back seasons since 2004. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that could be true. I'd have to go back and look. But it's been a while since we've had success in this football program. And I'm not talking about just making a bowl. I mean, being 6-6, probably most UCF fans would tell you they're not happy with that. So I think that because since we've entered the Big 12, we haven't felt like we've accomplished anything. And that's completely valid from a perspective of a UCF fan. I think that we're letting that history, that the Gus years are putting pressure on this coaching staff now for immediate success. And I think that is what's making it hard to swallow a 5-7 season. So I think that there's some clouded judgment from the UCF fan base that's upset with a 5-7 record, knowing that it maybe could have been 6-6 had a ball bounced our way here or there, or we, didn't shoot ourselves in the foot on maybe one or two different plays, that sort of thing. But I think that we are on track or better than we would have expected ourselves to have been if we took this back, 16 weeks ago and asked ourselves before the season started, where do we really expect to be? If anything, I'm more upset about the 4-8 season from 2024 with Gus and RJ Harvey and the team that we had last year than I am with this team managing to go 5-7 with the depleted roster and all these new guys and no offensive line and quarterbacks banged up and all this other stuff. So can't really say that I'm upset. I think we're right on track. If you looked back at the preseason media polls, I know there was no official Big 12 media preseason rankings, but everybody had us at the bottom of the Big 12, 15th or 16th place, and we're higher than that. So this is year one for this coaching staff. They came in after later in the year. They've only been here. It's not even been 12 months yet. They managed to go 5-7. If you go back and you look at Cincinnati and Houston in their first couple of years, I looked back, their first 2 years in the Big 12 with their coaches that they've had for a while now, they only won 8 games combined in those first 2 years. I think Cincinnati was 3-9 their first year in the Big 12, and Houston was 4-8, and then they had another 4-8 season after that. I think BYU was 5-7 in their first year, and I know that this is not our first year in the Big 12, but it is a reset for this program. So you have to throw out the prior years, and you have to give this coaching staff some chance to put things together. So can't say I'm upset. 5-7 is what I predicted, and that's where we landed.
This kind of reminds me of like 4th grade math, where you get the answer to the problem and you get the answer right. And I think the answer 5-7, 6-6 is probably where most people are at, right? So you get the answer right. That's what you expected. But then you're asked to show your work. And within that work, there may be things that you didn't, order of operations, whatever, and that gets you dinged points. I think that's where fans perhaps are frustrated, is that I think you were willing to be 5-7 and 6-6 because you knew it was going to be a year where it was growing pains, where you were trying to beat teams, but you maybe just wouldn't be as good as them because you just didn't have as much talent, as much time to put them together. And then the frustration became, not only was that true in many cases, right? We just didn't have enough talent, enough depth to do that. We also beat ourselves a ton as well, right? So you got the answer right to the question, which was, hey, UCF fan, how do you think we're going to be in 2025? Probably 6-6, right? You got the answer right. But I think the way you got to the answer is probably what has some fans going, well, wait a minute. Like, I was okay with us struggling because we were young. We didn't have a depth. We were trying to put pieces together, but we struggled because of those things. And, oh, by the way, the same mistakes happened over and over and over and over again. And we clearly missed on the quarterback position. We clearly missed on offensive line, and we never figured out a way to get those right. And at some point, I guess you can't. You just are what you are, right? You have what you have, I think Frost has said, right? So I think that's where a lot of, in my view, I think where a lot of fans are at is they understand the answer to the question. They got the answer right. But when you look at the way you solve the problem to get to the answer, I think that's where people are like, well, what are we doing around here? And how did we end up? I think if there's any angst or any anger or any emotion in the negative, I think that's where it comes from.
I think if you're going to stick with that analogy, that we're taking a test and you got the question right, I think we also have to look back at how we thought a lot of these teams on our schedule were going to be as compared to how their seasons turned out. I think a lot of us expected teams like Cincinnati and Houston to not be quite as good as they were. I mean, Cincinnati and Houston both had really good seasons this year. And I recall us looking back at the preseason before the season started thinking, okay, maybe Cincinnati's a win. Houston's maybe is probably going to be a win. There were some teams that turned out to be a lot better than we were expecting them to be on our schedule this year. So I think that some of the material that you were looking at for when you were studying for your test ended up being a little bit different than the material that was actually on the test itself. So yes, we got the question right. But to your point, I think you said it right. We got to the correct answer using perhaps the wrong logic.
Yeah, and I think that's where you lose points on the test because you don't do things that way, Brian. But obviously bookends the season, and now we are in December 1st. And I would say to you, Brian, we are coming up on what is a crucial 45-day period for this 2026 UCF team. You can't win the season in December, but you certainly can put yourself behind. And so I want to kind of fast forward the calendar a little bit and talk about what the next 45 days look like for UCF. What decisions have to be made? What's kind of on the horizon? What are the things that you and I are looking forward to learning and seeing? What are we scared about? What are we anxious and nervous about? What are we excited about? So let's just set the calendar for people right now. Again, it's December 1st as you and I are talking, or you watching this, right? December 3rd, Wednesday, is when National Signing Day, early signing day, opens for the high school class. So high school kids can sign Wednesday through Friday. That's the first opportunity the Knights have to, quote unquote, get better, right? Is in that first period of time. According to 24/7 Sports right now, UCF has the 89th ranked national recruiting class. Just so you know, there's only like 60 something a group of P4 programs. So UCF is obviously below some schools like the vaunted New Mexico State, which is fantastic. UCF also ranked 14th in the Big 12. There's only 16 teams there. So signing day comes up on Wednesday the 3rd. A 12 commit class as it stands right now. Certainly there is time for UCF to maybe flip a couple players. UCF could also lose a couple of players, Brian. The hall of the class right now seems to be Rocco Marriott. He is the highest ranked player in this class, according to 24/7. 2 quarterbacks in this class, 2 running backs, 2 offensive linemen, 3 defensive backs, 2 linebackers, and 1 defensive end, Brian. So that's the first opportunity UCF has to get better. And we'll see if these kids sign. We'll see what this means. Again, it's hard to pretend or we know what's going to happen, right? There is another signing period in February. So if you don't get some of these guys now, you can maybe have them sign in February, but I think a lot of kids are signing early, right? So after this week subsides, Brian, we have the ink dried on the high school class. Now comes some really interesting decision points. The portal opens January 2nd. So the portal is only one this year, January 2nd through 16. So basically, between December 1st now and January 2nd, you're going to see guys' names who are going to go in the portal. They announced for the portal, both at UCF and other places. And now Scott Frost has a bunch of decisions to make in terms of, one, evaluating this roster. Who do you want to keep? Who do you need to have on this team? Who maybe isn't going to fit? Who do you not want? Who are some guys you want to send on your way? Who are guys you're trying to keep, but you're afraid of getting poached? So basically the next 30 days are going to be kind of a wild, wild west of all that stuff. So they have a lot of decisions to make now, Brian, at a lot of different positions. 27 guys walked on senior night. Now, there are some weird things in college football where there's court cases and there's eligibility stuff. So it's possible a couple of guys potentially find their way back if there's some court cases that go the right way, Brian. But you're losing 7 offensive linemen, 3 running backs, 3 defensive backs, 2 defensive ends, 2 linebackers, 2 receivers, a kicker, and a quarterback. That's kind of what you're losing off this roster. And then you've got to decide who's next, Brian. So who are the guys that you say to yourself, off the top of your head, 2 or 3 guys that you say, these guys, I need them on my team next year? UCF has to do whatever it takes to retain these players for our roster.
2 guys come to mind, and ironically enough, they're wide receivers that come from a wide receiver core that was questionable all year long. Showed some flashes of some very high potential. I think Dwayne Thomas needs to be somebody that we heavily recruit to stay here at UCF. Speedy Thomas and who was the other guy I was thinking? I always get their names mixed up. Dwayne Thomas and
probably thinking Wade Charles is
Wade
the other
Charles
guy
is the other one I was thinking about. Thank you. Drew a blank on that one. Both had really good games these last couple of weeks here, and I think that they're major weapons for whoever starts at quarterback for us next year, whether it's Taven, whether it's somebody else we get in the portal. So I think that those are 2 major names. I know that we're losing most of our offensive line, which perhaps without being crude is probably for the best at this point. So I know that we're bringing in some younger guys, and we've got some younger guys on the team already that are offensive line. So hopefully they're able to step up. But if I'm Frost, I think I'm targeting most of our defensive players that can come back. And I'm certainly going after those 2 wide receivers to get, keep some offensive stability from one year to the next. I think that you have to focus on those guys and fill in around them.
Yeah, I think, look, offensively, I think is where the work has to be done in the portal. I think defensively, UCF has some guys if they can retain an Antoine Jackson, if they can retain a Jaden Bellamy, two cornerbacks, right? If they can retain that interior, Horace Lockett, is he coming back off injury? You've got John Walker, you've got Sincere Edwards who got injured. So can they retain some of those core pieces? Isaiah Nixon played pretty well. Linebackers, you got to keep Lewis Carter. I mean, he was a maniac on defense. Right? You've got to find a way to keep him, right? So you've got to be able to keep some of those core guys, and I imagine those are going to be guys that are probably sought after in the portal, and people are going to be calling and asking and talking about. So you've got to lock those guys up. You've got to either figure out how you get a deal done with them early on the ref share line, or what you can do there. See if you can get guys locked up. I know there's some rumors floating around that UCF's already begun trying to lock up some of these guys, so perhaps some of that's already taken place, and we'll see. But I think if you're looking at positions, I think UCF's going to have to make some decisions at linebacker, right? You've got Lewis Carter, who you hope can come back. Cole Kozlowski, he could be in this Diego Pavia situation where he played FCS, so can he played D2, get another year, right? Like maybe there's a pathway there for Cole Kozlowski, but I'm not going to bet
depends on how
right
fast
now.
They can resolve that. Yeah.
Outside of that, like you've got a bunch of guys, TJ Buller, Troy Ford, Phil Picotti, who just haven't played a ton. So I think you're going to have to go and get some linebackers. I think that's one position really to look at. I think offensive line's the other one. I hate to kind of beat a broken record here, but offensive line, obviously, you're losing 4-5 guys who played a pretty significant amount for UCF this year. I'm not saying they played well, I get it, but guys who got snaps, who played a ton of reps. So you're losing a bunch of other guys. The only two quote unquote starters that are returning, or at least scheduled to return, would be Preston Cushman and Connor Meadows. Outside of that, everybody else is kind of, and Carter Miller maybe. Outside of that, everybody else is kind of a crapshoot there. So I think those are the two spots, Brian, that UCF has to go back and say, okay, we've got to figure out how to prioritize linebacker, offensive line. I do think wide receiver is another area that they have to fill in at. And I think running back maybe as well. Losing your top two running backs, you may feel good about AJ Adai, you may feel good about Stacey Gage or Tavian Swint, but they didn't play at all this year.
We really don't.
Right? So what do you have there? I think there's some major question marks on this roster that this staff has to figure out over the next 45 days. Are these the guys we have? Can we go upgrade? What's available to us out there? Are we going to let some of these guys walk? Do we want to pay or match some of these guys? I think some interesting decisions from a personnel standpoint coming up.
One other thing that we need to consider is we need to go find a kicker that's going to be able to replace Noe Ruelas, who's been absolutely solid for us this year. And kickers are tough to come by. We've had an up and down history, love-hate relationship with our kickers over the last few years. And Noe Ruelas was really solid for us this year. I'm upset we only got 1 year out of him from the transfer portal. But so I think that Scott Frost needs to go find a kicker, perhaps a punter. I'm not sure that our punting has really been up to par this season. So if there's, somebody out there that we think could do a better job, I wouldn't be afraid to bring in a punter. But special teams is certainly something that you can't neglect either, right? Everybody's going to focus on offensive defense, but special teams is, that third part of the game, and you can't overlook it. And it's played a pretty vital role for us this year.
So maybe decision point one for Frost and his coaching staff is they have to sit down and look at their roster. Where are we going to be? Where do we just need bodies? Where do we just need people to fill in because we're losing guys? Where do we think we can upgrade? Where do we think that we have the ability to maybe go out and get an impact player? Can we afford that? Who do you maybe let walk? Who do you try to keep? A lot of really interesting decisions on that roster group are coming up, Brian. Next on the list for Frost is just that, the coaching staff. So as much as you hope the coaching staff stays together, you and I are all day Sunday. We're in group chats talking about so-and-so is going here, so-and-so is going there, right? With all this movement in college football and all these coaching staffs, there are going to be openings all across the country. So one, is it possible that any of the guys in this coaching staff get a phone call from one of those new coaches and say, hey, I want you to come coach in my place? I think Grinch is probably the coach we're all most concerned about, which is interesting to say, because I don't think I would have said that a year ago, but he's probably the one that you're most interested in. I think fans obviously would be upset if like a Mackenzie Milton got a call and went someplace, right? But I think Grinch is probably the name that, and maybe Grinch and Martin on the defense are probably the two names that I think UCF maybe wants to protect at all costs.
Yeah. Martin's certainly one that you would think would hopefully want to stay because he's a holdover from before. But Alex Grinch, is an interesting call if you're looking for, a defensive coordinator or somebody to come into your defensive staff. If you're a coach that's moving positions or is in need of a defensive coordinator, do you give this one, successful year for Grinch? Is that enough from what we have seen out of his past, right? He was much maligned coming into UCF,
Sure.
and a lot of folks had said he couldn't do it. He wasn't very good. He had terrible stops at USC and where he had been before. So is one season really enough to kind of shake that off? So hopefully he, wants to stay, maybe get another year under his belt and say, look, I can do this consistently before he goes out and gets perhaps a head coaching job somewhere or a higher profile DC job somewhere else. So hopefully he wants to stick around. I think that he's certainly one that UCF fans would want to keep around just because the defense has been the strong point. The other thing to consider, Adam, is not just the coaches that are coming in. It's the fact that all of these new coaches who were just announced over the weekend, obviously Lane Kiffin leaving Ole Miss, going to LSU, John Summerall perhaps going to Florida, Alex Golesh to Auburn, not Arkansas. So
Nope.
all of these coaching changes means that roster turnover is also going to be a thing. So the portal is going to be very active.
Yes.
So
Yep.
In addition to keeping your coaches and the players that you have here, we also need to consider what guys are going to be available and perhaps looking to make a change from one school to the next because their coach is leaving. So there is a ton of homework for this coaching staff to be doing behind the scenes over the next 45 days, like you said, to figure out what they're going to do and who they're going to go after and who they're going to try to retain. One thing we didn't talk about, which is going to be interesting, is what are we going to do at quarterback? Obviously, you mentioned Rocco Marriott coming in, but he will be a true freshman. And that's assuming that he signs early and perhaps enrolls early in the spring semester and gets almost a full year before the 2026 season rolls around. If that is the case, do we bring somebody like a Taven Jackson back? I'm not sure what we're paying him. I don't know what our NIL or our rev share budget is going to be. Obviously, UCF hasn't announced that we're going to pay the full amount of rev share that's available for the 2026 year. That's something that we're going to have to monitor as well. But if you're Scott Frost, you bring a Taven back, knowing that he was banged up and he didn't have an offensive line. What's he costing? Do we go in the portal and find a different veteran for perhaps a cheaper cost than what Taven would be to keep, assuming Taven even wants to stay? A lot of moving pieces that this coaching staff is going to have to juggle behind the scenes.
Yeah, a couple of things there. I mean, I think the Taven thing is interesting because I think there's certainly an argument to be made for you keep a hold of a quarterback and you let that person battle it out with any of the guys coming in, both Rocco Marriott, Dante Carr, either of those guys coming in, right? Maybe you grab another guy in the portal and you let the battle commence again. Sure. Surprise, surprise, UCF with a quarterback battle, right? But you said the key thing is the reality of 2025, 2026 college football is, can you afford to pay Taven starter money to be on your roster if he's not your starter? And I think those are the decisions this staff is going to have to make. Can you afford to pay him at a starting salary, knowing there's a possibility he's not even your starting quarterback? And I think you're going to have to make those valuations. You're going to have to know who's available in the portal, who's coming out, who's going to be around, how much money you want to put on the quarterback position. Do you do? And again, I know there's a lot of work to be done, but you just saw BYU take a true freshman quarterback, surround him with position players, and have a pretty good team. Can UCF do that? Do you need to go find somebody in the portal and pay big money for a quarterback that you think is going to be really, really good to have him come in and run your system, right? A lot of decisions have to be made, but you're not wrong. This staff needs to be in front of VCRs or whatever the heck they watch tape on these days to figure out and scout and look at rosters. We've been talking for a while. This entire coaching, conundrum, there's going to be guys who are going to pop free that don't know where to go, right? Don't have a home, don't want to go to this school, can't go there. They have somebody already. There's going to be some guys that are available, as well as, Brian, the other thing we didn't talk about with coaches. Does Frost want to keep everybody on his staff? There's going to be some coaches who are going to pop available at this point in time now, right? Who aren't going to be retained, are going to be moving around. I'm not saying he has to make any changes, but does he find or know or see a coach that's out there and says, hey, maybe this is a good addition to my staff. I want to upgrade or I want to change. and we have to have the elephant in the room conversation. Frost is going to have to sit down at some point and have a really, really tough conversation, probably with Alex Farah, Coach Bear, who stepped in and coached the offensive line in the absence of Coach Clark. While I think he's done as good a job as anyone can expect on the situation, I think UCF probably has to go out and get a more experienced O-line coach. So you're going to have to stop and talk to Alex Farah and say, thanks for what you did for us. Thanks for maybe you still got a spot with us, whatever you want, but you're going to have to go out and probably find a new O-line coach at the minimum. But with all this coaching turnover, now Frost, again, he's got to fend off maybe someone wanting to call some guys on his staff, but he's also got to look out and say, is there anybody else out there that fits what I want, that does what I want, that knows my scheme, my system? At the very minimum, I would think we're going to have that tough conversation with Alex Farah and think about what we do at offensive line coach going into 2026.
I always thought that he came in to fill in that role for the offensive line spot that was, suddenly open. I always thought that he came in with just the intention of helping out during the season until a replacement was found.
So that's two guys. So Alex Farah was Sean Clark's assistant.
Oh, you're talking talking about the assistant.
Yeah, Danny Hope, I think, was the guy who came in off the beach of Cocoa and just like hung out for a couple of months and looked like Ernest Hemingway and coached our offensive line very well. I think it's Farah who's kind of been the guy that everyone was like, hey, he's kind of stepped into that role. Now maybe Frost says, hey, you can stay here. You can be, I'll guarantee you a position on my staff, whatever you want to do, but I need to bring in a more veteran O-line coach. Again, he's going to have to have that tough conversation.
If I'm Coach Frost, I'm looking for an offensive line coach that can come in and bring some guys with him. I mean, that's kind of got to be the conversation that takes place behind doors is, hey, are you comfortable with your guys? Is there a question that, maybe they're going to follow you if you go to another school, or, what kind of assets can you perhaps bring with you? Because in the portal era, that's got to be something you got to consider, especially at the offensive line position, right? We know coaches tend to have players follow them, which is their prerogative, but it's very difficult to find offensive linemen in the portal. Scott Frost has said that himself. And I think we saw that this season, right? We had a lot of guys that came in from the offensive line that came from the portal, and they were misses in a lot of ways. So it's going to be very difficult for us to go out and rebuild an offensive line, which we're going to have to do to some degree. Our offensive line was not good, and a lot of the guys are graduating anyway. So I think if you're Coach Frost, you have to rely on a coach that's going to come in and bring some assets with him. So, I mean, that's exactly what I would be doing if I was Coach Frost.
Well, you mentioned earlier, we talk a lot about, again, it's December 1st. As you and I are talking today, Scott Frost hasn't even been here a full 12 months yet. Yeah. He didn't join until, later in the middle part of December. His staff didn't come together until late December, early January. So this is going to be their first opportunity to make some of these decisions, to sit down and put together a master plan of what they're going to go after, what they're going to prioritize, what they want to pay, who they want to look at, right? So for anybody who says, hey, we were 5-6 because that staff didn't get enough time, very fair argument. Now the time is here. Scott's got the staff he wanted. He hired all these people individually. He's got the group he wanted. These next 45 days, again, I'm not saying you're going to lose this season, but the 25 season is what it is. The 26 season basically started on Saturday. And how does that season come together? And these next 45 days are going to be a huge part of all that. Again, you have a signing day in February. And yes, you could have a Jake Retzlaff situation where somebody leaves the school and just enrolls someplace else. All that's possible. But the reality is the biggest roster movement is going to happen now in these next 45 days. And I think it's going to be fascinating to figure out how prepared is Frost and this staff. How prepared are they to go after the right guys? How are they thinking about their roster? What moves, what decisions are they going to make? Ross talked, again, post BYU. We want guys who are all in. How do you figure that out in 14 days in a portal conversation, whether or not the guy you're talking to is all in or that he's just here for a paycheck? So I think it's going to be I don't want to overstate it, but I think these next 45 days are really going to be something to watch. And at the end of these 45 days, to sit down and go, okay, what did UCF decide to do tactically, and what decisions did they make? How are they going to tie into what this team's going to look like in 2026?
We're going to find out how good of an evaluator Coach Frost and his staff are in this next 45 day window. Here's what I'm thinking. we've seen Coach Frost has gone out and he has found talent in players that were perhaps overlooked by other programs. So that works in our favor. I think
sorry, not to push back.
Sure.
Did he though? Like I know that was the theme of this last season, which was, hey, we went out and got it. You mentioned Dwayne Thomas Jr. Okay, sure. Like, yeah, he played okay, but for every Dwayne Thomas Jr., there's a DJ Black who cardio merchant, right? Like,
I think that's fair, but I think that you also have to consider the full big picture, which is, he had limited time in the portal once he got hired. He didn't get a full off season to go out and evaluate and get players. So as you have mentioned, he was shopping in the bargain bin, right? He had what was left over after the Black Friday shopping deals had taken place, and he was coming in to pick clean what was left. And I think he was able to find some talent, right? So we're going to find out whether or not that is true. We say that he's good at evaluating talent. We're going to find out how true that is. So if I'm Coach Frost, the first focus is going to be on this January signing day. Get these high school players in there and see what you have to work with from there. At the same time, you also need to be looking at the portal and evaluating who's going to be available in the portal, figuring out who's going to leave this program, and figuring out who's going to be available and what you're going to do. You need to figure out what you're going to do at quarterback. You need to figure out what you're going to do at some of these other positions like we talked about for punter and all these other things. We need to figure out what these players are. You need to focus on depth. Depth has been a major issue for this program for several years now. And we saw it this season again, right? We get players that hurt and they're not able to compete, and we stumble further on down the road in the season because we don't have the depth to compete with a lot of Power 4 programs. So if I'm Frost, I'm first focusing on that high school class, but also looking at the portal. And then once you get those locked in, you're going to have an idea of what kind of roster you're going to be looking at. I'm not really concerned with the February signing day, the later signing day. The guys that are going to be signing later are either looking for a paycheck or are probably not the correct culture fit for what UCF and Scott Frost want to do with this. Terry has mentioned in the past weeks that we're probably going to see us lean pretty heavily in the portal. So I'm not necessarily concerned with the fact that we are, towards the end of the conference when it comes to our ratings. 89th, you mentioned high school recruiting class. I think that in the portal era, the high school recruiting class is probably not as important as it used to be, just because people become fluid and they move from school to school a little more frequently than we're used to seeing. Plus, we saw Gus do a lot of booms, for these high school guys that came in and then never played or didn't pan out. So I think that that's really more of a bust, a less important role. So I'm not really concerned with the fact that we're at the bottom of the conference in that regard. Plus, a lot of it has to do with how many guys you're signing, as opposed to the quality. So not really concerned with that. But I think that they have to have a plan in place immediately. And perhaps it's a good thing that we're not going to a bowl game, because now the coaching staff can fully turn their attention to what has to happen over this next time period, this 45 days, which are going to be crucial for the 2026 season.
Yeah, I don't want to be the negative guy, but I actually think if you and I are talking December 1st, 2026, giving up that bowl prep and focusing on these 45 days on roster construction may actually be the better use of the staff's time, considering everything you just laid out, how important they are. I think two things I want to get your thoughts on. So we talked about Frost not having a lot of time, kind of going in and trying to find some guys he could really quickly, and did a lot of diamond mining, right? A lot of D2 guys, a lot of FCS guys, a lot of G5 guys, and clearly that strategy had some hits, but also had some misses. Do you want to see him go more big game hunting and try to get guys that were from bigger schools, bigger stars, bigger names? Or do you like the approach of trying to layer in a Phillip Dunham from FAU who came in the roster and played pretty damn well, or a Lewis Carter who was from Oklahoma who didn't see the field a lot, who played pretty damn well, right? Like, do you want to see him, or do you think you'll see more big game hunting from Frost and the staff?
I'm not sure that it really matters in the end. UCF has always been a program that's prided itself on doing more with less. And for anyone out there who hasn't come to terms with the fact that UCF simply does not have the money that most of the programs that are in the Big 12 have, we're not going to be able to compete with the BYUs and the Texas Techs when it comes to spending money on our athletic programs. And I think that that's going to play a big role in the ability to go out and get perhaps a big name player from the portal, as opposed to trying to find a way to diamond mine and find some talent and coach them up. I think that you cannot deny the fact that a lot of these players came in this year. Scott Frost and his coaching staff didn't have a lot to work with, and they were able to coach up a lot of these guys. And perhaps it was, guys like Philip Dunham who already had the talent when they came from FAU, but I'm much more confident in Frost's ability to go out and find these guys from programs like an FAU and bring them in and be able to give them an opportunity and coach them up, rather than expect UCF to go out and drop dimes on a quarterback that's going to potentially go to LSU or some other program like that, or even a Texas Tech, right? We saw how much money Texas Tech spent on there. We are not going to be able to compete with that. I mean, plain and simple. We're at the bottom, and even programs like Houston and Cincinnati, who are our contemporaries from the American, I hate to tell you guys, we don't have the money that Cincinnati and Houston have either. So we're going to have to go out and find the guys that are the right fit. And I trust Frost to be able to do that to some degree. Will there be some hits and misses? Absolutely. But I think that he probably understands what he has to work with. Since this is his second go around here, I think he's gearing up for that. He probably understands the game that he's going to have to play, especially with the fact that he's alluded to, how bad things are with poaching and players and contracts and all that other fun stuff. So I think he's prepared.
Well, that's why I think the staff is going to be so important, right? You said this earlier. A lot of times players are going to follow staff members that go to other schools, right? They're going to want to go follow their old position coach or their old whomever. You look at the Frost staff, I mean, especially on the offensive side of the ball, they didn't bring a ton of experience onto the offensive side of the ball. Frost had been out for a while. Beckton was at UCF. McKenzie was at Tennessee. Cooper was an analyst at BYU. Jimmy B was at Utah State, I think. You didn't have a ton of those guys on the offensive side. Defensive side, Brandon Harris was at FAU, right? Probably not surprised you see some FAU guys on this roster. But, Martin was already here. Grinch came from Wisconsin, although no one came with him. So that's why I think you have to look at the staff and just wonder, because you also said you can bring in the diamond miners, which are fine, but then can you develop them? And I think if you look across the positions, there are some places like you talked about, like defensive back, where that hit, where you brought in some guys like a Dunham, like a Jaden Bellamy, and all of a sudden they became pretty good. And there are some positions that you brought in like wide receivers that didn't hit. So did you hit on the wrong guys? Did you not develop them? I think that's where the staff conversation, I think, is also important. Now, Frost has been loyal to a fault probably with his coaching staff throughout his career. So again, I'm curious to figure out. I'm not advocating for a change. I'm not saying he's going to make a change, but I'm curious to figure out if he looks back at the staff and says, okay, I need to kind of rethink this, because it's not just, hey, who do I know that I trust? It's, hey, who do I know that can come in and bring some talent with them to kind of to match the game we're in right now. Last question for you. Quarterback. Brian Peterson, you're in charge of quarterback. How are you thinking about QB? Are you okay with Taven coming back at a lower value? Are you okay with Taven coming back at the same value? Cam Fancher, medical red shirt. That happens. Are you okay with that? Do you want us to go out and be in the name in the race with the sexiest name out there, or do you want us to come bring in some pieces like we did this year of guys who were and figure that out in the end? How do you think Frost should handle quarterback?
It's tough to answer that question because I don't have the information that the coaching staff has on Rocco Marriott and Dante Carr, the two high school players that we were signing that are going to be coming in to play quarterback for the Knights. I don't know what the coaching staff's confidence level in their ability is to perhaps get in as a freshman and lead this team. So it's tough to answer because I don't know that. And I also don't know what kind of money we have to work with, right? I don't know what our rev share funding is going to look like. I don't know what we're paying a Taven Jackson or a Cam Fancher. I don't know if either of them, well, assuming Cam Fancher could even get a red shirt and come back, I don't know if Taven would be willing to take a pay cut in order to stay. He'll certainly explore his options, I would assume, and see if there's another team out there that wants to match or do better or do whatever it is to maybe consider moving. But without knowing all of that, it's kind of the answer I have for if I would keep Taven is kind of the answer that I would give to anybody that's, saying we should fire Johnny Dawkins, right? Who are you going to get that's better? So I think it comes down to that being your answer. Sometimes the person that you have and know is better than the unknown. So
Sure.
I would say that I've seen flashes out of Taven. He hasn't impressed me the most, but I think that if he wants to come back and the coaching staff can come to a number as far as rev share, contract, whatever you want to call it, that everybody's comfortable with, I'd say that he's got a veteran presence on this team. He knows the offense. He's got some of these players he's worked with. Let's bring him back and see what also these freshman quarterbacks that we're bringing in have to play with as well. I think that we have seen flashes out of Taven that perhaps he's been playing injured and without an offensive line. So I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. And another year in this system with a better offensive line and perhaps another year of transfer portal players coming in to put around him would make for an interesting 2026 season. I haven't been completely off the Taven train, but I also think he hasn't been playing with a full deck in his favor. I think the offensive line and the players around him also limit some of his ability. So I'd say bring him back if we can agree upon it, rather than go out and find somebody, unless there's somebody out in the portal that's just a major home run and it just happens to fall into our lap.
Again, one of the more fascinating decisions that have to come over the next 45 days as UCF looks at high school recruiting and then looks at portal, looks at coaches, and looks at obviously that January 2nd to 16th window when you can bring folks in. You're going to see some guys leaving the program. Everybody just buckle up, right? Some may be by design, some may be looking for us other things elsewhere. Some just may not want to be a good fit here. There are going to be some names that they're going to come out from UCF and other schools that'll be surprising. But hopefully, I'm really curious to see when this 45-day stretch ends, Brian. We sit back and we kind of do the math and do the report card of how UCF did, what they gave up, what they got back, kind of where they are from a collective. But I do think these next 45 days are going to be some of the most interesting times in really the future of UCF football. Right? If you hit on this class, Brian, you start to bring that trajectory forward. Can you take another year? Can you take a 4 straight losing season in the Big 12? Like, it feels like you've got to take that step now. It feels like for everybody out there who maybe wants to give Frost a bit of a pass, a year 0, if you will, right? Okay, fine. That's in the books. That's in the rearview mirror now. But year 0 means next year is year 1. It means you've got to take that step forward. And that starts over the next 45 days.
I haven't been shy about saying I think that this is a year 0, year 1 for Scott Frost. I think that still holds true. I know a lot of UCF fans probably disagree with that opinion, but I think that considering the factors that he had to deal with when he came in so late in the season and what he had to do with this roster upon Gus's departure, I think that he gets a pass. But that pass is now over. We are now starting fresh, and him and his coaching staff need to perform on signing day, and they need to perform in the portal. And if that means that Terry needs to pony up and give him the full rev share and let him go do what he's going to do, I think that we are starting now. And this 2025 season is now behind us. You've had your year. 2026, we need to see significant improvement, especially in the offense. Hopefully we see, most of the defense come back and they're able to continue to do what they do. But especially on offense, we've had it's been such a struggle on offense. And that is Coach Frost's bread and butter, right? Is running an offense, finding these players and getting them on the field. So this next 45 days is going to be critical to his second tenure here at UCF to see what he's going to do with these coaches and these players. And after the 2026 season, we're going to see how this thing plays out. And at that point, if you're out on Coach Frost, that's probably more fair than being out on him at the end of the 2025 season.
Well, if the first 48 hours of college football off season has proven anything, it's been crazy, Brian. So buckle
Absolutely.
up. It's probably going to be even crazier, and I'm sure UCF will have some shrapnel come their way at some point in time. But we'll keep you updated on everything we learned throughout the entirety of these next 6 weeks. Obviously, we'll have a full caveat of Sun shows, Pegasus and Suns Live and Around the Kingdom, all that good stuff this week. So everybody keep it plugged in here. We will keep you as informed as we can. Have a fantastic week, though. Take care of yourselves and each other until we talk again. Go Knights.
Charge on.